Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you all doing great. I hope you had a great week, and welcome back. It's time for more photography reviews. Just going through the usual stuff. My name is Jakub. I'm professional landscape photographer based in West Sussex, England, and I'm also the founder of Clever Photographer. As a business, what we do photography courses, photography digital tools, and lots of photography fun. We also run our Clever Photographer YouTube channel, where we mostly focusing on Luminar Neo. But more about that later. First, let me quickly talk to you about what we're gonna do tonight. What we do, we usually look at your images and we try to give you some tips and tricks on how to keep improving and keep moving forward on your journey towards the incredible perfect photography. Now, usually what we do, we take the image and we look at three aspects of the photos. We look at the technical part. This is where we look at things like composition, not composition. This is where we look at things like camera settings, exposure, sharpness, noise, and all of that to do with the technical part of the photo. After that, we look at the artistic part of the image. This is where we look at things like composition, framing, storytelling, and everything to do with that artistic part of the image. And finally, if we have a little bit of extra time, and if I think that it's beneficial for that specific photo, what I like to do is to give you some tips and tricks on photo editing. And what I do basically, I use Luminar Neo as the editing software. But if you don't have Luminar Neo, then you definitely will be able to use most of the editing tips in any current photo editing application. So this is what we do. Now, how you can join us, let's get it out of the way. If you want to join our photography shows or join our Clever Photographer Academy, or most importantly, get your monthly bundle full of digital tools for photographers, then all you need to do is to join our membership. Our membership is called Clever Photographer Plus. And to join it, jump to our website, cleverphotographer.com/forward membership. Sign up there, that get all of this fun and join us with your photos, maybe already next week. So, folks, this is all out of the way. You know what we're going to do, and you know how to join us. So we can jump into your photos. Quickly looking into the comments. Greetings to Tony. Tony, greetings to you too, to Essex. Hello to Dick, and hello to Joe to Belgium. Folks, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope you're all doing great. If you are joining us live, we are streaming on our YouTube channel at Clever Photographer, also on our Facebook page at Clever Photographer, and our group, Clever Photographer Academy. So that's where you can find this stream. And if you can't make it at 6 p.m. UK time every Tuesday, then you can also watch it on replay on each of these platforms. So let's go to it. Zdeněk, hello to you too, to South Africa. And let's start because we have lots of photographers and lots of photos to go through. So we're going to start from David with his cityscape captures. So let me go through it. Let's just make sure I have the microphone nice and set. And we're going to start with the first picture right here. I mean, that is beautiful. I love the fountain with the ice on it, that kind of nice contrast of the blue at the back, the gold coming through it. That is very pretty. David, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at the image. Starting with the camera details, Nikon Z30 is the camera with the 16 to 50 millimeters lens. And from the camera settings on this image, ISO 800, 26 millimeters, f16, and 1/250th of a second. So, David, looking at the camera settings itself, one thing kind of standing out is sorry, Zdeněk, yeah, you're right. Let me make sure that you can see the picture. What you can see is that the ISO is a little bit higher. Talking about the daylight, unless you're going for longer shutter speed, there shouldn't really a need of using higher ISO. I think the idea is always to try to stick as close as possible to 100 to make sure that you avoid adding any additional digital noise through the camera. So the lower the better, and especially when the light condition isn't too complex, I would try to stick to 800 as much as possible. I think what would maybe help you to lower the ISO would be to lower the f-stop just a little bit. I think with 26 millimeters, if you would be somewhere around f7.1, you would be perfectly fine. Everything would be still in focus, and on top of it, you would be able to lower your ISO. So you know the kind of triangle where you have your ISO, shutter speed, and the f-stop. It all works together. Starting goal is to have a nice and low ISO, and that's what I would do. Anyway, moving on, looking at it, let's zoom in a little bit and let's have a look at the sharpness, which is great. Everything is good, nicely in focus. I quite like the fact that, for example, the foreground is a little bit soft. That adds a nice depth to the image, so I really like that. So the sharpness is good. For 800 ISO, it's not really a big problem. There's not much noise in it anyway. There is a little bit of kind of artifacts you can see in the sky. I wonder if you guys can see it. If I zoom in, you can see like these little waves. But actually, that also often happens when the image is transformed into JPEG. So that could be caused by many different things. However, technically, quite like it. The light from the side really helps. It adds a little bit of interest to the overall statue. It kind of makes a nice highlight from the side. Yeah, so it's really, really nice. Technically, really nicely done. Just keep an eye on the camera settings, and everything else worked quite well for me here. Talking about the artistic part, I mean, talking about the first impression, I really like it. I think that combination of almost an aqua color, that kind of blue with little bit of cyan in it, works really well in a combination with the gold. I think that's a great mix of colors, which I think can work really, really well. The framing is really nice as well. It's almost like a kind of Instagram, Facebook story crop, but for this shape, I think it works quite nicely. I think it removes any distraction from the surrounding environment, and it really helps to let us know immediately what you're trying to show us, what you're trying to highlight, and I think it works really well. So in overall, David, I think this is a great picture. I really enjoyed it. Very nicely captured together. The eyes is really nice. The light is great. The sharpness is there. The framing is really nice. So everything good there. Nothing really I could tell you about post processing. Yeah, there is a little bit of blue. It's a little bit cooler than I would probably like, but that is very much an artistic decision. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think in overall, this actually works really, really well. Moving to your next picture, David, it's an evening capture or probably night capture of church with probably monastery or castle at the background. So let's go ahead and look at this photo right here. This was actually captured with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And looking at the camera settings, ISO 1600, f1.8, and 1/9 of a second. So, David, I'm guessing you already know what I'm going to tell you after my full speech about ISO for the first image when you have it on 800. Clearly, with the 1600, it brings even more issues with itself. And you can really see it when you look at the especially upper part of the image. The sky really has a lot of noise in it. And that's often the case. I'm sure you guys agree with me. Lots of kind of high dynamic images or low light situations, when the noise start to creep in, it usually starts in the sky. Lots of skies get noisy very quickly, and you can really see it here a lot. What it also does at that level is that it starts to kind of blend in with the details of the image, so you'll start to lose the details. It's a little bit more visible towards the background, but even on the cover itself, when you zoom in, you can really see how it start to pixelate because of the amount of noise. So definitely something, yeah, that comes probably with the limitation of the mobile phone. I personally also have a iPhone 14 Pro Max, and where it can take great photos and record great videos. In most cases, when it comes to low light, even though it still can capture the images, the result compared to your DSLR or mirrorless is absolutely nowhere the same. But anyway, still great idea and try with a mobile phone. Moving to the artistic part now, I find lots of it to be a little bit distracting. So for example, lots of brightness here on the foreground, which I think takes lots of attention away from your main subject. Also the sky, it this is kind of like one flat color. So, and because it's bright, which gives a contrast towards the rest of the image, again I think it brings lots of attention away. And also the tree here, I think, is just a little bit too distracting for me. It actually takes away a little bit from the balance of the image, where I think the church in the middle and everything works. Then the tree really makes it to kind of fall on one side, which is not great neither. So, yeah, composition wise, there could be few things different, and but I think of a lot of what I'm trying to describe has to do with the direction of the light. So again, the bottom is way too bright for me. And again, I find this a little bit distracting. And I think the sky is also a little bit too bright and it takes away lots of attention. What you could do different things. You could crop it a little bit tighter with a simple crop right here. So let's say that you could go for something like this. And by doing that, immediately you remove the distraction of the bottom. So we are more focusing on the church. Same thing around the tree and everything. We could add a little bit of a stronger vignette. So that way we focus more on the center, not much on the tree. And even more so, you could make the whole bottom a little bit darker with a simple linear gradient. So I think somewhere like this, which would just close the image a little bit from the bottom up. Finally, for the sky, it needs to be a little bit darker. Now, there are different ways you could do it. Let's quickly try with the Enhance AI and the Sky Enhancer, which makes the sky just a little bit darker. And then we can also use the Relight AI, where we're going to make the background just a little bit darker. Usually it takes a moment. So I think somewhere around here, and a little bit more brightness in the front. And that's about it. So let's have a look where we started. This is where we kind of started and where we are. And the image afterwards, which I just finished, I think really helps to get more focus on the main subject, which is the church. So, David, those were the pictures. Well done for sending them over. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed them. I think they both, really lovely, lovely captures. I'm sure great ideas and great um, subjects to capture. This one with the iPhone has a little bit of a limitation on the quality it can produce, but still, thank you for sending them over. Which one brings us to Marcus. Marcus, we have three images from you. Let's have a look at them. There's a little bit of winter landscape right here with some nice trees, mountains, and dramatic sky. Then we have this beautiful sunset with the traditional houses at the back, reflection in the water. That is also very lovely. And then we have another kind of night, like a winter snowy landscape here. So two images. Let's have a look at this one and this one. So we're going to start with the sunset right here. Talking about the camera for this one, Nikon Z8 with the 24 to 70 millimeters on the lens. And from the camera settings, ISO 64, 24 millimeters, f8, and 1/6 of a second. So nice and low ISO, all good there, 24 millimeters, perfect for a landscape. F8, also great choice there. You can see with the 24 millimeters, because you're really wide, F8 still give you sharpness pretty much all the way towards the end. So that really works very well. And 1/6 of the second, giving you a really nice exposure. It's evening, so it's a little bit darker, but definitely all the details are there. Nothing is under or overexposed. So all is good. Sharpness good. Noise wise, don't really see any. So perfect, perfect. Now, composition, Marcus, I really like this one actually. I think it has a lot of lovely, um, naturally dramatic colors. I like the sunset sky. I like the reflection. I quite like the opening and the river helping us as a leading line. The framing of the third of a sky and 2/3 of a land can help quite well as well. If I would really have to be picky and I would have a wish, this is nothing you can do because that's how nature created it. But I would have wished that this part of the image wouldn't have been there, just because I think it takes a little bit of attention away from the rest of the photo. So that's just one thing I would keep an eye on. And just kind of looking where I zoomed in, I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me zoom in even closer. And like this is probably one of the, how we would say that, this is one of the cleanest example of a chromatic aberration, your green and red. And when you keep going a little bit further, you can see it again. Usually it's kind of darker purple or pink or darker green, and it's not as visible, but this is like, this is something you could actually teach chromatic aberration on. That's quite interesting. I wonder, how did you get this, Marcus? Often this level of chromatic aberration comes from combination of lens and specific light hitting it from certain direction. So on this one, that is quite interesting. But other than that, I think it's really lovely. Editing wise, I wouldn't change anything. So well done there. Really nicely done. On this image, let's again start by looking at the camera settings here. Nikon Z8 with 24 to 70 millimeters. From the camera settings, again, ISO 64, 30 millimeters this time, f13, and 1/50th of a second. So looking at it, let's start with the sharpness, because all the camera setting is good there. So let's start with the sharpness. Sharpness is quite decent. It's not pinpoint sharp, but I think it's quite decent. I just wonder where would be the main sharpening point, probably somewhere around here. The light is good. Even the sky is quite dramatic. It doesn't look overexposed. There are not really underexposed areas. So that all look good. It's quite nice and interesting light coming from one direction. So all of this works really nicely all together. The sky with a little bit of texture and different levels of luminance works really well. So all in all, technically, I think it's nicely done. Now, when it comes to the composition, the storytelling part, um, I love the sky. I think it really adds to the scene. I love the fog and mist coming out, all the greens. But something I probably said quite a few times on this show is just the kind of main standout subject is the little hut here, or the little house here. It really kind of is a contrast towards the rest of the scene. The scene is your landscape nature with the trees, snow, and a sky. And then you have the house, which really stands out. Very quickly, human eyes or the viewer's eyes would get caught on that. And unfortunately, on this image, it's very close to the edge, and it almost looks like it's cut out at the bottom. So it's just a little bit of a shame. I wish you would have more of the bottom and maybe a little bit less of the sky. Even though the sky is really interesting, I think I would rather have a little bit more landscape here with a little bit more focus on that red house. I know it's not always possible. Sometimes the nature and the conditions doesn't allow us to do that, but I would have hoped to have a little bit more of the little house here. So I think that would be quite helpful. But otherwise, it's a beautiful landscape. Again, I think the edit is nicely done. Yeah, very natural with lovely colors, lovely light. All of that works really nicely together. So, Marcus, well done. It was great to see you back with your pictures. I always really enjoy looking at them and sharing some of my thoughts about them. So, if you can, in the future, make sure you come back and send us more photos. Which will brings us nicely to Caroline. Caroline, I believe I have 3 images from you. Let's have a look quickly. 1, 2, 3. Yes. So what do we have? 2 portraits and then this super cute dog running towards you. It almost looks like he's running for dinner, because that's how it looks anyway. So what we're gonna look at? Let's have a look. There is a little girl with 2 dogs. Then we have a lady playing on a violin, and then we have the dog. Now, for some reason, I feel like I've seen this image before. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna look at this image right here and the dog at the end. So starting with this photo, Canon 5D Mark IV, lens 24 to 70 millimeters, and from the camera settings, ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f2.8, and 1/500 of a second. Nice and low ISO, nice and low f-stop to give you nice fast shutter speed there, 1/500 of a second, to make sure that everything is nice and sharp. Let's have a look at it. everything is good. Caroline, to be honest, one thing which is a little bit of a shame is that the image is a really low resolution. We are on 1080 on 720, which means that the moment we start to zoom in, it will start to pixelate just a little bit. However, it's still super cute. Uh, it keeps super cute, and I think it works really nicely. So, technically, very well done. I really like the light coming through the trees and creating these different areas of highlights. That works really well. And at the same time, sharpness looks quite good from what I can see. Noise is nicely managed. So all of this looks good here, Caroline. So all of that good. Now, the only thing when I'm looking at it is um, I'm noticing a little bit of green haze or green leak or green tint in that image, which really is coming across a little bit into the skin tones and the dogs. So let's see if we can quickly fix that using a simple white balance. So if we jump quickly in the develop tool, color here, and maybe just help a little bit with the color. Let's have a look. Actually, not a little bit. I'm on 41. Now, if you look at it now, let's kind of zoom in maybe to this. You will not, you will almost not notice it. You will think, oh, you haven't really made any change. However, if I show you the before, and I don't know if you guys can see it. Let's have a look. If I show you the before, this is the before and after. The difference is huge. I'm not 100% sure if you can, if you guys can see it on the screen or no, but really, by adding the tint, the skin becomes much more natural. It brings the nice kind of pink, yellow, orange skin tones, where before there was just lots of green tint across the whole image. So definitely with the tint to bring back some of those natural colors and manage the rest of the image. Now, I explained this in the past, but just very quickly, often when the camera captures an images where there is a dominant color, and this often happens with green and blue, actually, um, often the camera then take that color and it leaks it a little bit in all the other subjects. So basically, when there is a lot of blue, then you start to get the blue hue or cool hue on the faces and skin and houses and everything. And similar with the green, when there is this much of a green, often then you start to get green in the skin tones and all the other objects. So then you just need to step in, use a little adjustment, and I think it helps. So before and after, and there we have it. So this is for this image, and now we're gonna look at the dog. Caroline, the snow. My suggestion is that you added the snow afterwards, I think, which is not a big deal. I think it works nicely, and as a postcard or card, I think it would work really well. So let's start on this image by looking at the camera and camera details. Again, uh, Canon 5D Mark IV, 24 to 70 millimeters on the lens, and from the camera settings, ISO 100, 70 millimeters, f2.8, and 1/1000th of a second. So from the camera settings, again, spot on there, nice and low ISO, f-stop, yeah, to give us, let's have a look, nice sharpness on the face, and actually the depth is nicely blending together, so you have the ears a little bit softer, but the front of the face with the tank looks really cool. And 1/1000 really helps to make sure that the foreground is really crisp, and it creates this really cool photo. Caroline, I love it. I think it's great. I think the sharpness is cool, no noise or not visible. Light is really interesting as well, coming from the side, giving really nice light towards the face, and actually even creating a little bit of shadow on this side, which I think works really nicely. Now, when I zoom in to this part, you see that there is a little bit of some kind of artifacts. I don't know if you can see it. It's probably somewhere here, but that maybe I need a little bit of adjustment. But other than that, it's great. Composition, love it. I think everything works here. This is the kind of Facebook or Instagram post crop, that kind of 4:5 in a portrait. I think that works really well for these type of pictures. Square wood works really well too, as well. I think this kind of portrait capture and portrait crop for this type of images can work really well, and it looks great. The main subject is really clear here. I really like the gentle depth of field with the background being almost soft and blurry, so that all works really well. Natural edit, little bit of extra saturation, but I think it works together. Nothing wrong with there. The snow is nicely added too. So all in all, Caroline, well done. Great job with this image. So well done. Great two pictures. Nothing much editing wise I could do on this one. The first one, just a little tweak with the white balance. And that's it. Well done. Great pictures. Which brings us to Dick. What we have? Landscape capture, I'm assuming. Something almost like, I don't know what it would be. Some kind of ring in the middle of the forest. Really, really interesting. Let's have a look if we have Feet Stroton. Maybe if anyone knows where it is, just write it in the comments. Otherwise, we're gonna go and have a look at the camera details. So captured with the DJI drone, obviously from the top like this, with the camera details on this one: ISO 500, 4.5 millimeters, f2.8, and 1/8 of a second. So camera details wise, yeah, a little higher ISO, but that's how it is with the drone. The settings are slightly different than with your camera. F2.8, 1/8 of a second, yeah, giving you light everywhere, similar. Um, so that is all good. Now, when I zoom in, I see now that could be noise or it could be also film grain added in post processing. The sharpness now, the ring itself is quite sharp. The trees, not so much, but maybe that's why I'm assuming the transition into this monochrome look, just to kind of counterfight something that maybe wasn't 100% right with the picture. But still, I think it's quite creative. And definitely, if we move into the artistic part, it really creates a lovely picture, lovely composition. It's the kind of pictures where you show it to somebody and they will keep looking at it just to figure out what they actually looking at. Where sometimes landscape can be a little bit boring when you kind of showing the same spots over and over and over, where then you maybe add the dimension of a drone to be able to look at it from different angle or different view. It can really help to attract more attention of the viewer. So this is definitely the case. I think it's very creative. It's a very interesting structure, and I think the crop of the square, or if it's a square, I think it works nicely too. Post processing wise, yeah, it's nice. I would probably push the contrast a little bit further. I would try to create even more contrast between the darker parts of the trees and the snow and the ring, just because I think it would become a little bit more dramatic. So what I would do, I would, for example, try and push the normal contrast. Let's have a look somewhere around here. And then maybe here in Luminarnio, you have a tool that is called Dramatic. And if you add it a little bit, so let's say somewhere around 29, it kind of adds this kind of grungy clarity contrast to the image, and it can really help to get the image stand out. So I think that's definitely the case on this one. And then just a little bit of vignette to close the image and add more attention towards the center. And I think we have quite cool result here. So let's have a look at the before and after. So this is the before and this is the after. And I think, yeah, it can help in the overall feeling of the image, because what you really want, you want the circle to stand out from the photo. You want the trees to just kind of disappear and create the surrounding, and you want the circle to stand out. Where if you leave it really flat, it starts to kind of sink in with the rest of the image and it's not as dominant. So that's what I would do with this one. Now, looking at it, Dick mentioned that it is a bike around a roundabout in Belgium, going up and down in the trees. That's quite cool. That's really cool. So that brings us nicely to the second image with a bird right here, a little bit of wildlife photography. Let's look at the camera details again. Nikon D5300 with the 70 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 400, 300 millimeters on the zoom, f5.6, and 1/320th of a second. So ISO 400 for wildlife photography, obviously with faster shutter speed, that's perfectly fine. 300 millimeters, so really kind of punched in with the f5.6, giving you the background, which is yeah, really as soft as it gets. It's very kind of soft and blurry, which helps to create a really nice background for this bird, which is in a brighter color. So I think the contrast of the white and black of the bird with that really uh, blurry would be the word for the background. I think it really works nicely together. On the top of it, you have the rain going around, which I think it works really nicely too. So altogether, it's a great, great capture. Technically, very well done there. Level of details from what I can see on this image is great. You can see the eyes, you can see the beak, all the details on the feathers. So that's all cool there. Light is really nice diffuse light. There is no like strong contrast or strong shadows. Everything looks good. Little bit of the highlights on the side, which works really nicely. So technically, really well done. Composition wise, yeah, very interesting. Obviously, it's a little bit of a shame the base he's standing on. You can see lots of the distracting elements on it, but still, again, lovely capture. I would probably frame it a little bit tighter just to get reduce of some parts there. So maybe like 16 on 9 and maybe just rotate it a little bit. So I'm thinking somewhere around here. And that way we would add even more attention towards the bird. We could probably make it even smaller somewhere around here, yeah, and then end up with something like this, which I think would give us a little bit more impact on the bird itself. So I think it would just help, yeah, to add more impact on the main subject, and not focus so much on the surroundings. So that is all cool. Little bit of vignette maybe would also help just to add more attention towards the bird. And let's have a look. Little bit of inner light with extra brightness there works really well too. So, dig, great picture, great capture, well done technically, lovely composition, lovely thoughts. Both of the images are really, really cool. So, thank you for sending them over. Have a lovely evening, and I hope to see more of your photos next time. That brings us to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we have a landscape captures or landscape capture of the waterfall and a butterfly. Elizabeth, okay, let's start with the first one right here. Canon RP with the Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 100, 28 millimeters, f22, and 1/125th of a second. So from the camera settings, okay, so nice and low ISO, 28 millimeters, which is good wide lens for this type of photography. F22, definitely much higher than I would go for, especially when then you still end up with 1/125th of a second. So situation like this, just kind of thinking about what we're trying to capture. We have a moving water, we have a little bit of texture in the sky, and yeah, the landscape there. So you have a different options on what you could do with it. You could go for long exposure to really make the water nice and smooth. And in that case, we would be looking for longer shutter speed, probably anything from half a second, maybe a second, depending on the speed of the water. If you would want to go really flat, you could go 5, 10 seconds. Again, depend on the situation there. So that would be one approach, which I think would be really interesting. In that case, if we would want to go lower on the shutter speed, we would probably have to use ND filter or maybe play around with the ISO if it can go a little lower and so on. So that would be one reason there. Another option would be just to capture the image, freeze the moment, have a fast shutter speed, so probably even faster than 1/125th of a second, and get everything frozen in time. So those are the two approaches. The only reason why I am mentioning the f22 and not being the great solution is because eventually when you go high on your f-stop, and often depending on the camera, but when you go over f16, as you go higher, you will start to lose details on the image. They will start to be soft, they will start to melt together, and eventually they will kind of start to disappear. And when I zoom in to specific parts, for example, right here, now I'm going to try to zoom in a lot so you guys can see it. But yeah, you just really start to lose these details with this high f-stop. These not necessarily because they are in a mist anyway, but even when I look at kind of closer elements, it's like on these parts, even though this is probably where the camera was focusing, you can see how they're melting together. So the F22 only really in the emergency where it really makes sense for the camera to use it and for the specific technique, I would really try to stick between, for the landscape, f7.1 and f16. Those are the kind of great numbers. And anything between f7.1 and f11 on most lenses, you will get the best performance you can out of the lens. It will be sharp, it will have less distortions and so on. So anyway, regardless, technically this is something to avoid, high f-stop. So moving on, the light, yeah, looking at, there is just a lots of haze which takes away from the image. Clearly the most focus and also light is on this branch here and part of tree, which is a little bit distracting, but we talk about that in a moment. The sharpness isn't great as well, unfortunately, Elizabeth. You can again see it here on these parts. The noise, there is a little bit when we zoom into the sky, you can kind of see it a fair bit. So definitely also something to work on. When it comes to composition, I really enjoy the waterfalls, the sky with the texture. I think that all works well. Again, coming back to something we talked about earlier, and that's the foreground element, which in this case, it's just, yeah, it's a little bit of distractions on the image. Obviously, there are these incredibly powerful waterfalls, and you really want to focus on them. They are the main subject, where the tree, because it's the most saturated on the image, it attracts lots of attention. Also because it's the, after the sky, the brightest part of the foreground, it also takes lots of attention. So regardless what you do, your eyes keep going towards the tree here. So that's just something I wish that wouldn't have been there. So that's for this image here. And Elizabeth, moving to the butterfly. Let's have a look at the camera settings on this one. Again, Canon RP, Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters, and ISO 640, f8, and 1/80th of a second. So, Elizabeth, looking at it, the butterfly is very pretty, but it is a little bit soft. When you look at it, so the the wing looks quite good, but this area would need just a little bit more sharpness. So I'm assuming maybe little faster shutter speed. So you could go a little bit lower on a f-stop and a little bit higher on the shutter speed, and I think that would help to get it a little bit more crisp and sharp. You could also look at where you were focusing with the camera. If you're using automatic focusing, what point you were focusing on. It seems that most sharpness is on this part of the wing here. And as it goes down, you lose a little bit of sharpness on the head of the butterfly. Still, great attempt. I think definitely something what we all need to keep doing, challenging ourselves and try different things. The camera settings, yeah, a little bit higher ISO, but what I would focus more on is adjusting the shutter speed and the focus point to make sure that you get the sharpness on the entire animal. That would be my goal for this type of photo. When it comes to composition, it's nicely done. I quite like the fact that it has a nice depth of field. The contrast of the butterfly standing on the green and black, I think, works nicely too. This square crop can work really nicely. What I would do, I would probably crop it a little bit tighter because I think you have lots of this empty space, which is not really necessary. So I'm thinking probably something like this to add even more attention towards the butterfly itself. And that's about it. Maybe a little bit of dodge and burn with a little bit of highlights on the wings, but that's about it. So I think as a storytelling, as a capture and framing, it's all good. What I think you need to focus more on is the sharpness, and that will come with the focusing and with the shutter speed. And that brings us to Zdeněk. Zdeněk, two images. We have giraffes this week and also this canyon here. So, Zdeněk, let's start with the giraffes. Let's start by looking at your camera settings. Canon 77D with the 24 to 105 millimeters. With the camera settings, ISO 200, f5.6, and 1/200 of a second. So looking at the camera settings, nice and low ISO, f5.6. Let's have a look. If I go probably about 100%, it looks all good. 1/200 of a second, give you quite nice result. Obviously, a tiny smaller resolution. So once I zoom in a lot, it is a little bit pixelated, but that's my screen. This has nothing to do with the picture itself. So the sharpness seems decent. Noise wise, I think it's quite reasonable. So that's all good. Don't see much there. The light is little bit flat, not flat, but I really like it. I think I prefer it like this when it's more diffused than when there is harsh light creating heavy shadows and so on. So this I think is great, and I mean it's a great capture. I really enjoy that. I enjoy always seeing this wildlife. I think moving into the artistic part, the framing on that portrait with the two of the giraffes leaning together, I think works really well. I think it's very lovely, um, very composed. They're looking at you. They're creating a really nice focal point for that image. So all of this works really nicely. I think Zdeněk, this is very lovely capture, and I really enjoyed. When it comes to post processing, yes, there are different things you could do with it, but it's really quite nicely done with very natural feel to it, with that kind of orange, brown, natural color standing out. So I'm not going to do anything to it. I think it's just really nicely done. So again, technically nicely done. I really enjoyed the diffuse light, great sharpness. Then composition wise, the fact that they're looking at you, the framing, the edit with very natural feel to it, I think that all works super well. So Zdeněk, well done. Congratulations on this one. It's a great capture. The canyon itself. Now, this one is the one where the light isn't as great. So this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the giraffes and the diffuse light. Here, even though it's a lovely subject, you can see the dark shadows, how they are really contrasty and how they take lots of attention away from the image, make it like a different patches and so on. So that's a difficult one. I know that there are some parts probably in South Africa where it's difficult to be there at different time of the day, but these shadows and heavy shadows will always take a little bit away from the images. But we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to look at the camera details quickly. Canon 600D with the 18 to 55 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 100, 18 millimeters, f9, and 1/250th of a second. So again, nice and low ISO, f9, perfect choice there. Sharpness all the way through, 1/250th of a second, giving you good exposure. Although the light is harsh, as I mentioned earlier, 18 millimeters, nice and wide. All good there technically. Let's have a look. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's have a look at the sharpness. Now we have a sharpness on the foreground here, a little bit less as you go through the scene, but I think nothing crazy. So it's all good there. Noise, no, I think that's all good. So technically, I think that part is nicely done. Composition wise, I quite enjoy the foreground. Actually, I think that's a nice opener to the entire scene, also giving us the depth. I think for landscape pictures of this caliber, you always need a really nice foreground, middle ground, and background, which works really nicely here. I think the framing is nice as well. The canyon really kind of giving us a flow through the image, giving a little bit of mysterious feel as it goes behind and you don't really know what's going to be there. So all of this, I think, works nicely together. The framing with the sky, yes, I don't really mind the fact that there is just a little bit of it because it doesn't necessarily take anything away. I prefer to have a little bit of sky than none, unless you're really focusing in. So I think this works nicely too. Now, I mentioned the light already, and because of the light, you are losing a little bit of the colors and not necessarily details, but there's just lots of elements which have the same kind of feel and it guides you through. So difficult to know what I would do with it. Maybe turn it into black and white and see if that would make like a nice dramatic landscape. But still, great technique, very well composed together. Just unfortunate time of the day, which then have an impact on what can be done with it in a post processing. Zdeněk, thank you very much. love the picture of the giraffes. Well done. Congratulations on that. And I can't wait to see more images from you in the future. Stefan, it's your time to shine now. We have 3 images from you. Again, we probably only have a time for 2. So that's what we're going to do. Let's have a look. What do we have here? This, I think, is according to the notes, it should be Liverpool. So it's some kind of gate or bridge. Then we have this policeman right here. So lovely portrait right here. And then we have the model here with almost the same lighting I have here, actually. So let's go and look at the 2 portraits. Starting with this one right here. Captured by Olympus with the Olympus 12 to 40 millimeters. Camera settings, ISO 500, 40 millimeters, f4 1/80th of a second. Now, Stefan, looking at it, the camera settings are fine. Yeah, a little bit higher ISO, but that's no problem for a portrait. F4, nice and fast. 1/80th of a second. I mean, depending on the situation, on the light, how you set it up and everything. But I think maybe it's a little bit slower. And I think the combination of that with the higher ISO means that it's not super crisp sharp. I think the sharpness, looking at it at this resolution I have available, there's lots of sharpness on these buttons, some of them on the hand, on the little um, magnifier or however you call it, loop. But then you kind of start to get a little bit of softness towards the background. So that's just a little bit of shame because when I then talk about the artistic feel, it's a very lovely picture. It's a lovely idea. I think it's very nicely put together. I really like the background, the overall feel, the uniform. I think all of that works really nicely. So that overall artistic part works really well. The technical part, I would just like a little bit more sharpness to it. So that would be the main part. The light coming from the side can work quite well. Yeah, that's about that. And that's about it. Now, post processing, I would personally, because it kind of is almost like a very low tone image, I would probably either turn it to black and white or I would try to play around with the white balance to get it just a little bit more stand out. Also, if you're kind of composing the image, getting the model to stand out and try different things, I would probably spend a little bit of extra time to cleaning it up, maybe just remove some of the dust, especially when it's a white dust on a black uniform, it's really visible. So just to remove the distraction, and keep the focus on the main subject, which obviously is the policeman. Here in Luminar Neo, probably just like in Lightroom with the brush, it's super easy. You just select the part that you want to remove. So let's say that we're going to do that very quickly. And once you have these parts selected, all you need to do is to quickly click on erase. So just like that, with the bit of magic and content aware editing, we got reduce of the dust. So I think that can help quite well. After that, what we could do, again, as I say, to turn it into black and white. So that bring down a little bit the luminance of these different elements, and then add a vignette, definitely. So I think somewhere around here again with a little bit of inner light. We could add a little bit of film grain feel to it just to make it almost like vintage. A little bit of mystical tool, something like this, and maybe a little bit of fade. Let's have a look. Something like this. Finally, what I would do, I would go then into the toning and add a little bit of sepia look to it. So something like, let's have a look if we increase it, something maybe like this. But let me bring it down a little bit, somewhere around here. And we have another image. So now we can finally just finish it off with a little bit of extra details to get some of the texture back. And this is what I would do with it. So just a little bit of fun to take the image and turn it into something a little bit vintage to get an advantage of the low tone colors and end up with something like this. So let's have a look before and after. And it's just a little bit, it's a twist on what you created earlier. Coming back to the catalog, let's go and look at the second image with this lady here. Now, to be honest, when I look at the second image, I am starting to see let's just reset this actually. I'm starting to see the signature or the signature look of yours because they both have a very similar tones and toning, very similar feel. So actually, that's not a bad thing at all. It's quite nice when you see a photographer who has a certain style. Now let's have a look at the camera details on this one. Again, Olympus with a 12 to 40 millimeters lens, 200 on ISO, f6.3 and 125th of a second. So let's zoom in a little bit. Looking at it, the sharpness is all good. Obviously, you can see the nose, the eyes, as well as the hand here. The light coming from the side, it's nicely done. The eyes are a little bit darker than I would hope. I would just hope to get a little bit more light, but that is more artistic decision than anything else. I don't want to say that that's wrong. Also, probably because of a little bit of editing or the light, you can see lots of her skin features standing out, which I'm not saying is necessarily wrong, but I think these features, like these little dots, they're standing out mostly because of the really strong light coming from that direction. So I'm not saying to remove them, I'm just saying to maybe soften them a little bit with the light next time. But still, a very creative idea of trying to use the two different lights from either side. The sharpness is good. Nothing is really over or underexposed. It's just very kind of nice signature feel to it. When it comes to artistic part and the overall feel of the image, I think it's nicely done together. Yeah, the two colors very kind of mystical, very kind of this kind of trend where the model is not really smiling or is not really upset. It's this very kind of thoughtful the way they look, and yeah, I think it works nicely. The framing works nicely too. Very basic background with nothing really adding to it, adding more focus on the main subject. So all in all, nicely put together. So Stefan, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. It was great to play around with your policeman and give you a few notes on the second image. And if you have a time, make sure you send us pictures for the next episode. And that brings us to Tony. Tony, oh my God, you had to wait today for what? For almost an hour. Usually, Tony, you are much earlier than this, but since you end up in a still life category, which actually should have been mixed when I look at it, since you end up in a still life photography, you're the last photographer of the day. So, Tony, let's have a look at your images. And what we're going to do, we're going to pick one of the flowers and then we look at the house. So, Tony, let's have a look. This one is pretty, very, very pretty. I love that. Very kind of pastel feel colors to it. Uh, Very lovely cropping, lovely combination of the colors. Very nice light with highlights around the center of the flower with a little bit of kind of gentle shadows around. I think that works really well. The rose is very nice as well. By the way, tomorrow, don't forget about the Valentine's Day. How could you, anyway? But yeah, let's talk about this one. Canon 7D, 50 millimeters, ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/5 of a second. So S and low ISO prime lens with 50 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/5 of a second. So the depth of field is really nice here. I really enjoy the fact that the whole flower is in focus, and then you have that very gentle softness towards the back, giving us really nice layers and really nice depth. Really nice sharpness as well. Lovely light. I already mentioned the highlights mixed with that very gentle shadows. I think that works really well. So all in all, Tony, lovely capture. Technically, I think very well done. Artistically, I told you over and over, I think the square crop can work really nicely on these type of subjects. And again, this is a great example where I think it really works well together. The texture, the depth, the colors, the edit, everything works really well here. I really enjoy it. This is very lovely. So that brings us to the second image, which is the house. Tony, I wonder where it is. Let me quickly see if I can see. It doesn't really say it. You can't say from the image itself, but let's talk about it as a black and white capture. Canon 50D, 50 millimeters again, ISO 200, f4.5 and 1/5000 of a second. So ISO nice and low, f4.5 Probably on this scene, I would go more like f7.1. 1/5000 of a second means that just everything is frozen, nothing moves, but nothing wrong about that really. Looking at the camera, looking at the image itself, I can still see a little bit of noise in the sky, which is quite interesting with just 200 ISO. It should be a little bit better than that, but that could also just be coming from the transition into the JPEG, so nothing huge there. So yeah, a little bit stronger light coming from the side. Not crazy, probably about that because yeah, it just makes the whole thing standing out. But anyway, still a lovely capture. Now, artistically, um, even though I really like the combination of the bright house mixed in a contrast with the rest, I think that really works very well together. I don't necessarily think that it's the greatest subject on the world. And I tell you why. I am a huge fan of historic buildings like this, but then you have the combination of the antennas and then you have the solar panels. And yeah, I just think that it's a little bit of a shame, that's so I would just wish they wouldn't be there so we can more focus on the traditional house. Framing wise also, I think you are just a little bit too tight, as the house is the main subject. It really is filling the full frame. The trees are kind of hanging a little bit out, so I wish you would have probably done two more step back and try to get a little bit more space around the house. When there is such a dominant subject like this, and even more so in black and white photography, when you have this like a big contrast between the white house and everything else, it can really fill in the space quite easily, so it's maybe not that visible if it would be colors because there would be other colors, but here the house standing out, it's full on, and it's just kind of really standing out from the photo. But other than that, nothing is really wrong with it. I enjoy the kind of nice vignette around it. I think it's nicely edited together. The contrast on the higher note with the darker parts, I think works nicely together too, so all is good there. So let's just summarize it. I think maybe one step or two step back would be one thing to do to get more space. Maybe a little bit less on the white to get a little bit less contrast so the house isn't as strong in the image. And that's about it. Tony, thank you very much. Thank you for sending your images over. Let's keep this on a screen since tomorrow is the day and it's time to say goodbye. Folks, today is, I don't know if it's a pancake day or crepe day, but I hope you all had at least one pancake or crepe with Nutella. If you haven't, go ahead and do it. And at the same time, take a picture of it and make sure you share it on the social media. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. If you have a moment, we are running tomorrow 25% discount site-wide on everything. So if you've seen something on our website that you fancy and you want to get additional 25% discount, then head to our website, use the code LOVE, LOVE, during the checkout code, and maybe get something for yourself for the Valentine's Day. Thank you for sending your images over. It was great to see more photographers this week. I always really enjoy that. Now I am away for next 2 weeks. I am heading to France and then Germany, photography trip, meeting some friends, and then I will be back, I think, the first Tuesday of March. All the dates are already in the member zone. All the dates are on the Facebook Academy. So just keep an eye on the link, and I will also send you a reminder before the next time. Folks, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care, stay safe, and I will speak to all of you soon.